You're listening to Parasearch UK Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to The Spirit Dimension with your host, Kerry Greenaway, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening, ladies and gents, and welcome to The Spirit Dimension. Slight change of plan tonight. I know you're all expecting the absolute wonderful Kerry, but she's not very well. So unfortunately, Kerry is not able to be with us tonight. I'm sure if she's available and she's around and she's okay, I'm sure she'll pop up in the chat room. But tonight's show still goes on with myself, Gemma, from the Supernatural Show. So good evening, everybody. With me tonight, I am joined by the beautiful Callie Sherrill. Hi, Callie. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm not bad, thank you. Not bad at all. So Callie, do you want to just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Sure. Well, I'm probably best known, at least here in the U.S., for having been the resident paranormal investigator at the world-famous Stanley Hotel. A lot of people know of that as the Shining Hotel, where Stephen King stayed, was inspired to write the book, The Shining. I have also been investigating the paranormal for about 13 years now, a little over 13 years. I've had experiences my entire life, however, and I'm just fascinated by what could possibly be going on, because I think that there's more to the story than a lot of people believe is actually happening. So that's me.
So in what way do you mean that you believe that there's more going on? Could you just explain that a little bit? Sorry, I know that's a tricky question to ask right at the very start of the interview, but you could take that many different ways, couldn't you?
Of course. The thing is so many people, and myself included, when you first get interested in investigating the paranormal, a lot of times people have a tendency to get stuck on one theory or one idea about what's going on. For instance, they believe that everything is a ghost.
Yes.
Everything is your Aunt Helen has not crossed over. She's stuck here, and that's why you're experiencing activity. Other people don't believe in ghosts. They believe in it's either an angel or a demon. There's no such thing. And then there are people who don't believe in any of it at all because they've never had their own experiences. Well, for me, I personally believe that there are thousands of explanations for what could be going on and for what we could be experiencing in the paranormal world. Perhaps one haunting is Aunt Helen, who is stuck here and hasn't crossed over. But perhaps another is an alternate dimension. I've had a couple of experiences myself that I believe may have been alternate dimension experiences rather than actual hauntings. I'm really big into the whole quantum physics type of thing. What could be creating our experiences, and are we creating our own experiences? So that's another thing that I think could possibly be what's going on, is that you go into a location such as the Stanley Hotel, which is so well known to be haunted.
Massively. That is like the most infamous place ever. I mean, that is definitely on my hit list of places that I would love to visit, without a doubt.
Right. But you walk in and you expect to have an experience. Well, if it's true that by thinking of things we create our own experiences, are we at times creating the hauntings?
Yeah.
And I think that that is the case. I don't think it's any less cool than the fact that it might be a ghost. I think it's pretty interesting if we can have a physical manifestation based on our thoughts. But
a lot of paranormal investigation, though, is actually personal experience, isn't it? It's not that often you are lucky enough to catch any evidence to back up your claims, if you will. So, yeah, quite possibly that is an option, you know, that we could be creating that ourselves. But like you say, there's so many different alternatives, and sorry, coughing away again. So many different alternatives that could produce the activity that we seem to be getting. So how long did you work at the Stanley Hotel?
I was at the Stanley for 3 years. It's kind of funny because I had moved to Estes Park at the time I was married, and my husband had been offered a job up there. He is a cowboy, and he'd been offered a job running one of the stables where they do the horseback rides through the mountains. And so we had moved up there, and because of the type of job that I have, I'm able to do things on the side if I want to. And I thought it would be kind of fun, because I was interested in the paranormal, if maybe I could become a tour guide at the Stanley Hotel, maybe show some people around and tell them some stories. But what I didn't think about was the fact that I'm terrified of public speaking.
Oh, bless you.
Terrified, absolutely terrified of it. So I sent them an email. They ended up hiring me. And the first tour that I had to give at the hotel, I was so terrified. I was filled with stage fright. It was so bad that an experienced tour guide had to take over, and I went into the bathroom and cried.
Oh,
and at that moment, I had to decide, either figure this out or quit. One or the two.
It's not easy, though, is it? It's really not. I'm not a big fan of public speaking, but yeah, I can waffle for England.
Well, but you know what's funny is that I obviously figured it out, and before long, I was standing up in front of crowds of 200, 250 people, talking about the Stanley Hotel, doing all of the media, doing all of the radio, all of the TV appearances.
From one extreme to the total opposite.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, 10 out of 10 for overcoming that fear. So while you was working for the Stanley Hotel, did you experience any episodes of activity?
Nope, nothing. I'm just kidding.
I was just going to say, you're spoiling my dreams, Callie. You can't do that to a girl.
Your heart just sank.
It did. It really did. I was like, oh no, that's disappointing.
Oh my gosh. I had so many experiences at the Stanley. I mean, that we could go on for hours about the experiences that I had. But let me just tell you that the energy in that hotel, when you walk in the front door, is just so amazing.
Can you feel it straight away? Is it like when you get off a plane and the heat hits you? Is it that kind of brick wall feeling?
It really is. You walk in the front lobby, and there is just an energy that, if you feel energy, or you're aware of feeling energy, because everybody feels energy.
Yeah.
Not everybody pays attention to it. But if you're aware of it and you walk in that front door, you know that there is something going on in that hotel.
Wow. See, now I want to go even more.
You'll have to let me know if you show up, and I'll give you a special.
Oh, definitely.
I'll show you around.
So, I mean, the Stanley Hotel is, I believe, from my memory, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it is quite big. Is there nearly 200 rooms? Or
At
100
the
and
Stanley,
something?
yeah, but there are two buildings. There is the main hotel, and then there's the building next door, which they used to call the Manor House. And to be perfectly honest, I can't remember what they're calling it now. I still just call it the Manor House.
The Manor House, yeah.
And so there are hotel rooms in both of those, and both buildings are haunted.
So it's not just the main building as well, it's the Manor House.
Yeah, and probably the most active building is the concert hall, which is farther down the hill. There's the main building, then there's the Manor House next door, and then next to that is what's called the concert hall. And that is where kind of the hub of activity sort of takes place. There's a lot of things that go on in the concert hall.
You see, you would assume that it would have just been the main hotel, the actual Stanley Hotel. Especially when you think that, like you say, The Shining was created from that building. Is it the land where the hauntings come from, or is it the building? Because obviously it's a huge area.
Yeah, a lot of people believe that there is possibly a Native American burial ground connection, which we have a lot of here in Colorado, just based on our kind of the Old West history that we have here. But the hotel is literally built on top of a granite mountain. There's no actual real foundation. You can go into the basement, what they call the basement of the hotel, which is the underground tunnel. It's really the employee walkway. But you can see where the hotel is literally sitting on the mountain. There's no concrete foundation. And so I believe that part of what's happening is that granite is just holding those messages or those experiences from all of the years of all of the people who have visited the hotel. And nobody really knows why certain things release back into the atmosphere and you experience them again and others don't. We don't know why, but I think that granite has a lot to do with it.
Well, yeah, granite is known for holding, isn't it? So
yes,
that would make sense.
Yeah. And then, they say that the fourth floor of the main building is the most haunted of the, the main building. And the interesting thing is there are two staircases, one on either side of the hotel, that lead from the second floor up to the fourth floor. And if you stand on the second floor at the bottom of one of the staircases, which is actually just outside of the Stephen King room, ironically, but you stand at the base of that staircase, you can feel what they call the vortex energy that runs up through the hotel. You can feel the swirl of the energy. If you stand there and you close your eyes, you will start to sway in a circular motion because you can feel the vortex. And I think it's coming right directly out of that granite and sucking right up through the hotel and then ending up on the fourth floor, which is why it's so active.
There's so many phenomenal reports from the Stanley Hotel that where would you even start with the hauntings and the experiences that people have had? It is crazy, absolutely crazy. But like you say, if there is that vortex that could be producing the granite, which is adding to the energy, bringing all that energy out, then you are going to have a lot more activity than what you would normally receive. But how ironic is it that it comes from the Stephen King room?
I know. Well, it makes you wonder if maybe that's why, that's what led to him writing The Shining, because some of the stories are that he had experiences when he stayed there for the one night he was there. It was almost, the hotel was due to close down because they did actually, just like in the movie The Shining, they did actually close down every year because the main building of the Stanley didn't have heat until the 1980s.
So they had
And
to shut it down for...
so they would shut it down for winter. And he was staying at the hotel the night before they closed for the entire winter season. And it just makes you wonder what experiences he might have had. And I'm sure he took literary license, obviously, in writing The Shining, because there's nothing horrible at the Stanley like what he wrote about. But it just makes you believe that could have been, that vortex energy could have been what led him to experience the things he wrote about.
That on its own, though, he stays one night at that location, and then he comes up with one of the best novels and films that are out there, just from one night.
Yeah, and he had writer's block, which was the reason he ended up at the Stanley to begin with. He was a writing professor at University of Colorado, just down the hill in Boulder. And he had decided just to get out of town to see if he could clear his head and kind of shake it loose and get rid of the writer's block. And he ended up spending that one night at the Stanley, went back to Boulder, and in only 3 days, he wrote the first rough draft of that 50,000 word novel.
In 3 days?
In 3 days. He was that inspired.
Wow.
Pretty amazing.
He must have not slept, not eaten, not moved. He must have literally just been sat writing to get that out in 3 days.
I know. That's just solid writing. There's no, like you said, there's no time for sleeping, no time for...
No comfort breaks at all.
Exactly.
That's rooted to the spot.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have that to thank for The Shining.
So thank the Lord for that. So going back to what you said about not being any evil in the Stanley Hotel. So you've not experienced anything that could be classed as a demon?
No.
Because there is lots of stories that we receive, obviously, not just for the Stanley Hotel, but for pretty much any haunted location. It is more often than not that a demon or an evil entity or a poltergeist will be thrown into the mix, if you will.
Right. And obviously there are always going to be stories like that, because demons are the hot commodity right now anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's what sells, isn't it?
Yeah, everybody wants everything to be a demon. It's what sells. It's what interests people. It's what people think they want to go up against. And so there will always be those so-called investigators who will come into any location and just determine that they have a bad experience, or they end up with what they perceive to be a scratch or something else, and oh my God, it's a demon. And so while people did have negative experiences every once in a while at the Stanley, I do not believe in any way, shape, or form they were demonic. And I also believe that a lot of people, going back to what we talk about, creating our own reality, I think a lot of people may have created their own negative experiences by expecting to have one.
Yeah, the expectation is massive, isn't it?
It really is.
And like you say, people do build up, especially when you read the stories. So if I was popping over, like it's around the corner, if I was going to come over to the States and visit the Stanley Hotel, with all the stories that I've read over the years about that specific location, that to me would give me preconceived ideas on what I'm going to go for, because I would be thinking, walking in, oh, this has been reported and that's been reported and this has been seen. So I would already be going in with that fueling me.
Right. But one thing I will tell you about the Stanley and the spirits of the Stanley is they like to surprise you as well. So you might walk in there with a preconceived notion of an experience that you might have, and then thinking that, oh, if I have that experience, then it was just because I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
But most of the spirits at the Stanley are very playful is not the right word, mischievous.
Mischievous, yeah.
Yes, and they like to mess with you, and they'll give you a surprise if you're ready for a surprise. So, yeah.
In what sort of way? What have you experienced then that's led you to believe that?
Oh man, where do I start?
Oh, any.
Let me tell my favorite story. It's actually the story that happened to me first at the Stanley, and it was before I even worked at the hotel. I was a member of a fairly large paranormal group at the time, and we had rented the entire 4th floor, all of the rooms of the 4th floor of the Stanley Hotel. And we were there for the weekend, and I had taken a couple of friends with me who had heard my stories of the experiences that I had had and had never really had any experiences of their own. So they wanted to go with me. So I took my friend. One of them was named Terry. The other one was named Lisa. And we headed up to the Stanley, and I wanted to stay in one particular room that I had heard really good, interesting things about. So I asked for room 407. And that night, we did an investigation of the rest of the hotel. We wandered around until way into the early morning hours. Now, my two friends had found it interesting, but they got tired about 2 o'clock in the morning, and they wandered back up to the room and went to bed. I didn't come back upstairs until about 4 p.m. Now, when I got back to the room and I walked in the room, my friend Lisa was asleep in the bed farthest from the door. My friend Terry was asleep in the bed closest to the door. So I climbed in my pajamas and I got in bed with Terry. As soon as I laid my head on the pillow, I heard these really heavy footsteps coming down the hallway out, and they stopped right outside my door.
But yet you was the only people because you'd hired the whole of the 4th floor.
Yeah, but I just assumed that it was another member of my group coming to see where I was. Mm-hmm. So I waited for the knock to come, for somebody to knock on the door. Well, there was no knock. And so I was just about to get up, walk over to the door, open the door, and see who was standing outside my door, when all of a sudden I felt the mattress next to me dip. And I could actually see the mattress dip. You know what it looks like when someone sits down on the bed. And of course, I was so disappointed because my friend Terry seemed to sleep through the whole experience. And she'd come to the hotel wanting to have this experience.
And slept through it.
And she slept through it. So the next morning after we woke up, she said, about 30 minutes after we had gotten up out of bed, and she said, "Hey, Callie, I guess if you're not going to tell me who sat down on the bed with us last night, I'm going to have to ask you."
So she didn't actually sleep through it. She was
so terrified by what had happened, by the experience of it, that she was left speechless and motionless. So wow. I thought she slept through it and she was wide awake, afraid to say anything.
So has she been back since that?
Oh yeah, she's been back. She would love to experience something like that again, but that was pretty amazing.
The problem is we don't have a crystal ball, do we? When we're hunting or investigating or researching, we don't have a crystal ball to determine what we're going to come across. If it happens, it happens. But unfortunately, there is nothing we can do to really guarantee it does.
Agreed. And I was lucky enough at the Stanley to be able to be there hundreds of times, to lead the ghost hunts, to do the tours, to spend the night, to do all of the different things that put me into situations where I could have experience after experience.
How much time did you actually spend alone in the Stanley?
Well, it's kind of hard to spend time alone there, because there's always guests and there's always people. But hundreds of hours, thousands of hours between staying, because I stayed there a lot. I didn't live in Estes Park after my husband and I separated. And so I would stay overnight at the hotel at times. When we would have the big events come in, with the stars of Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures or whatever, they would come stay at the hotel. I would be there for 4 days straight, never leaving the hotel. So I was there all the time.
You are one lucky lady.
Yes, I was.
Very lucky.
Yes, I was.
With the we'll call them spirits, entities, ghosts, whatever you wish to call them. With them, did you become attuned to their energies? Could you determine pretty much who it was through their energy? Because obviously, spending so much time in that one location, you would get to know them, and they would get to know you.
Yes, absolutely. They all do have sort of a different energy, a different frequency to them. Mrs. Stanley, my very first day at the hotel, I truly believe that she was responsible for getting me hired at the hotel. There's a connection there. I don't know what the connection is, but the second I started working there, I knew I belonged there. And the first day that I was working there, I was kind of sitting out of the way in the tour office, observing what everybody was doing, when all of a sudden I felt someone walk up next to me and take the back of a very cool hand and run it down the side of my cheek. And I definitely believe that was Mrs. Stanley.
That's quite a caring gesture as well, isn't it?
Yes, it was pretty amazing. And I really think that she knew how much I loved it, and that I loved it as much as she did, and she was happy to have me there.
See, a lot of the time as well, like the spirits will they'll be drawn to you by your aura.
Agreed. I agree.
So maybe it was just meant to be.
Because science talks about, like energy. You have to have like energy to draw like energy. Mm-hmm. You can't draw a high frequency energy with a low frequency energy. And so it does definitely depend on who you are and what your energy is. And I think that's why I connected with a lot of the spirits at the Stanley, because we just, we vibrated on that same frequency. Yeah.
Bonded. So, yeah, bit bonding.
Yeah.
See, you're not just known for the Stanley Hotel, though, are you, Callie? Because you're also a member of the Talking Board Historical Society.
I am a member of the board of directors. I'm the secretary, and I've been doing that just for a few short months officially, but I've been helping them out with different events that they do. And then I'm also lucky enough to actually live at the studio apartment at the house where the Ouija Museum exists. If you know who Robert Murch is,
yep.
Mr. Ouija.
I don't personally know him, but yes, definitely. Know of him, definitely. You are seriously lucky.
Yeah, he lives across the backyard from me, and has thousands of Ouija boards in his basement. So I'm right here.
Oh, wow. Just wow. Can I come and stay at your house, Callie? Can I come for a holiday?
Of course. You just let me know.
With the Talking Board Society, how much input do you have with the boards themselves? Because obviously, to be a part of that society, you would have to know your stuff when it comes to talking boards.
Right. When you say input, do you mean have I used the boards? I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah. I mean, would you use them?
Oh, absolutely. Again, that comes back to that same conversation we had of intention. So many people believe that Ouija boards are evil and that you're going to have a negative experience when you put your fingers on the planchette. And if you sit down with that intention, then maybe you might have a negative experience. But did you create that yourself, or was it because of the board?
The problem that you've got with a board is your subconscious could be moving that planchette anyway.
Absolutely. Yes, there are many opportunities for false positives. But you know what? That's the case throughout the paranormal. Anything that we do in the paranormal. What you're thinking could create false positives. I mean, we look at pictures all the time, right? Where somebody says,
Can you see that face?
I can see that face.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not a face.
It's pareidolia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the Ouija board is the same thing. The nice thing, though, for me, I don't use them by myself, not because it's the rule you're not supposed to use a Ouija board by yourself, but if you have two people who have their fingers on the planchette, it's much harder for my subconscious to be leading the planchette to different directions if someone else also has their fingers on there.
Yeah.
Because their subconscious is also going to be possibly leading it in a direction. So if we're both, and this always is with somebody that I trust, by the way, because I don't trust the results I get if I have not investigated with you, and I don't trust that you are really doing your best to be honest.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely.
But if I'm working with someone that I trust the results so much more if there are two of us using it, just because it kind of takes the subconscious out of it a little bit.
But then you're also still wide open for human error.
Oh, yeah.
But like you say, that's where trusting the person that you're using the board with comes in. You have to have trust.
Absolutely. And there's no way to get around it. And there's no way, to say that using a Ouija board is the best way to contact the spirit world. I don't know what the best way is. And to be perfectly honest, I think that there are many perfect ways for different people. Different people resonate with different methods. But I think if you sit down at a Ouija board and you expect to have a good experience and you expect to open your mind to what might happen, I really do think that you can have communication. I personally have had a really amazing experience with the Ouija board. That could not have at all been led by subconscious whatsoever. But I think that, the stigma of Ouija boards really needs to be sort of lifted, and that those of us who are in the paranormal field, who are trusted and who really do our research, need to be at the forefront of saying, hey, think about this for a minute. It's not really any different than using a K2 meter or a spirit box, because you're still asking to connect with the spirit, to bring their energy in and to communicate with it, regardless of the tool. And, a piece of wood or plastic or cardboard, whatever they're made out of in that particular instance, that's not inherently evil.
Yep.
It's the intention that people put into what they're doing. So.
Exactly. I mean, like you said, there's so much bad stigma when it comes to Ouija boards, talking boards, spirit boards, witch boards, whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. There is so much bad stigma. I mean, the biggest one that I seem to be hearing a lot is Zozo.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Zozo.
I mean, yeah, Zozo gets around is all I can say. But that is the biggest one that I'm hearing about at the minute.
Well, and you know why? Because Zozo appeared on Ghost Adventures. Because do you know that nobody had ever heard of Zozo until Darren Evans appeared on Ghost Adventures and told us about Zozo? And now suddenly he
Zozo's
is
everywhere.
He's the demon of the moment. But it's really because One man who believes in Zozo appeared on Ghost Adventures, told people about it. People took it and ran with it. And now it's the name that people, it's on everyone's lips. And the thing about it is, if you sit down at a board, you'll notice that the Z is on one end and the O is on the other end of the big curve.
So you're going to get the rainbow effect.
So how easy is it if you want to fake it, even if you have somebody else sitting with you, to push it just back and forth in that same arc? Z-O, Z-O.
It's that rainbow effect, like you say, exactly. It's one of the easiest movements to make if they was at different areas, then maybe it might not be so frequent. But I mean, the whole point is that Ouija boards are not like you see in the films, are they? They can be very safe to use if you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hollywood is really who gave Ouija the bad name. Ouija was patented in 1891. It was a parlor game. It was for fun. It was really to make the people who developed it a lot of money.
Well, they did though, in all fairness, because if I remember rightly, one year they sold more Ouija boards than Monopoly, which is phenomenal on its own.
Yes, in the 1960s. I believe it was 1967. I'm not perfect on my dates, so don't quote me on that, but it was.
You see, yeah, I'm not 100% on the dates either. I retain the most strangest bits of information, and then at some point they'll just pop up, and it's like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm sure I've read this.
and in the 60s, who was buying the game were
that
little girls.
Hasbro?
It was yes. Well, back then at Parker Brothers, it was little girls who were buying it to play at their slumber parties, their sleepovers with their friends, because it was just a game. Yep. And then 1973 came along, and The Exorcist came out, and also around that time was also the movie The Witchboard.
Yeah.
And those two movies terrified the movie-going audience, and people believed that what caused it was the actual Ouija board. Well, let me just tell you that the board, so The Exorcist is based on a true story. Yep. The true story happened with a boy here in the United States, not a girl. The board that the boy used in the actual Ouija house that supposedly led to all of this activity now lives in the basement across the backyard from where I am right now. So if that board was responsible for the demon that supposedly possessed this child, don't you think we'd have a little bit of activity over at that house?
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure that maybe something would be happening. I mean, as you said, did you say that there was over 1,000 boards in that building?
Yeah, he's got about 1,000 boards in the basement. They're not all on display. Some of them are in bins, and then he's got another storage unit full of additional boards.
Well, one can never have enough boards. In all fairness.
Exactly.
I know it's not in comparison, it's not that many, but I've got about 11 from so many different types. I've got the slate, I've got the wood, I've got the plastic and the cardboard. Nice. I've got about 11 of them.
So you have become an addicted collector as well, then.
Do you know what? I just love them. I think they are so beautiful.
The fascinating thing about Ouija boards is not only all of the legends that come with them, but the pop culture and the artwork that goes into them. Because everyone is created a little bit differently, and there's always something new to discover.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that's
my favourite one is my slate one, and that has actually never been used.
Oh,
I've never actually used it just because I just love it. I would be devastated if it got damaged. So nobody is allowed to touch that. That's like my pride and joy. So that cannot be used ever. They're just so beautiful.
Is the planchette made of slate as well?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't cheap in all fairness, but it is absolutely beautiful. And like you say, you know, they're not all bad. They're not what the movies make them out to be.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah.
But then on the other side of that coin, you know, would the paranormal field be as well known as it is now if it wasn't for the Stanley Hotel and Mr. King having his visit there, and the movies such as Exorcist, Witchboard?
Oh, I agree.
Even like the latest ones that are out, you know, without them, would there be as many people with an interest into the paranormal field?
No, absolutely not. Because what we're out there looking for in reality in the paranormal field is we're not looking for readings and EMF, you know, an EMF spike and who says, by the way, that a ghost puts off a high EMF, right? we're not looking for these readings out there. We're looking for an experience that scares the boots off of us, just like what happens in the movies. We're hoping that when we're sitting in one of those dirty, dark, abandoned buildings, asking a spirit to come around the wall so that we can see it, we are hoping against hope that what happens is what we've seen in the movies. Because that's really what drives us.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it is definitely the fight or flight response.
Mm-hmm.
I love that feeling.
Me too.
Obviously, don't get me wrong, you know, I want to find proof. I want to help in my own little way develop the paranormal field. I would love to do that, but realistically, what most of us go for is for the personal experience.
I agree. Well, and if you think about it, going for any kind of proof that you think that you're going to be able to present to anyone else and have them accept it that's probably not going to happen.
Well, you've always going to have your skeptics.
Oh yeah, and there are so many things that can be faked in this, especially in this digital age that we live in. You can fake an EVP, you can fake a picture, you can fake a video. The only thing you can't fake is a personal experience. And so I always say that if someone is a skeptic, they need to stop looking for, like, watching the TV shows or looking for one of their friends to convince them with this piece of evidence. They need to go out and have their own experience.
Yeah, trust your own instincts.
Yes. The only thing that will ever convince a skeptic that there is something going on is to finally have their own personal experience.
Mm-hmm. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, going back to the scientific, I do still like to try and back up any experiences I get with a scientific approach too.
Sure. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with feeling the tingles and then trying to measure them.
Yeah.
And figure out what is it in the environment that's causing those tingles. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all.
I think you have to be able to be open-minded enough to look at the paranormal field from as many different aspects as you can.
Agreed. And keeping an open mind on both sides of the coin. I like to call myself a skeptical believer. Yeah. Because the longer I do this and the more I do this and the more that I have seen, I'm definitely a believer because I've had experiences that I can't explain. Yeah. But I also get more skeptical as it goes along. And it's important to keep my mind open to both sides and not. When I first started in the paranormal field, I was looking to prove what I thought I already knew. And now I'm just looking for more questions.
Yeah. You just want those answers.
Well, I want questions because every time I'm losing my voice. Every time I find an answer, that answer leads to 5 more questions.
Wait, it's like a rabbit hole.
It really is. It really is. And so I've I have started on a search for questions. I'm no longer looking for answers because I don't know that I will ever find any answers that satisfy me.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for more questions and more experiences. And that's what's fascinating to me in the paranormal world.
See, am I right in thinking that you actually took yourself on a spiritual journey?
Oh, yes, I did. I don't know if you're familiar with the Camino de Santiago, which is a 500-mile, 800-kilometer walk across northern Spain. And I did that in 2013. Took me 43 days of walking, 10 to 15 miles a day, and it very literally changed my life.
How did it change your life? What was it about that whole experience?
Well, first of all, how does one walk 500 miles?
Well,
right?
that's I was just wondering that, to be honest. The first thing that went through my head when I read that you'd actually walked 500 miles was, my God,
Right.
those blisters.
How do you do that? I never once had a blister. But if you take care of your feet, you wear the right socks, you wear the right shoes, all that stuff. But the thing is once you accept a challenge like that, especially, I was never an athlete. I was never a backpacker. I never saw myself, I know there are a lot of people in the US who get on an airplane and they go backpack across Europe.
Yeah.
That was not me. That is not at all who I am. And so by accepting that challenge, and it tested me mentally, it tested me physically, and it especially tested me spiritually. And because of going through all of that, it's really hard to explain, but when you walk the Camino, it's as if you take your life and it compresses it down into those 500 miles. So you almost experience your birth. You experience the things that the different obstacles you've experienced through life. And then you arrive in Santiago and you think that the journey is over. And it turns out that when you arrive in Santiago and the journey is over, it's just begun. And your Camino has just begun. And that's very similar with life. When you arrive at death, you think your journey's over, but we all know there's more, right?
Well,
Your
I'm
journey's just
seriously
beginning.
hoping that there's more.
Yes.
Seriously hoping that there's more, because there has to be more than just this.
Oh, yeah. I'm certain that there is.
So the 500-mile walk,
Mm-hmm.
how did you keep pushing yourself? Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm no athlete and I've definitely never walked 500 miles in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I've done a half marathon. And when I say that I am not an athlete, I can't run for the bus, Callie.
Neither.
I cannot run for a bus. When I was doing my half marathon, you get to a certain point, and I'm sure that you will have done exactly the same on this walk. You get to a point where you just think, I cannot physically carry on anymore.
Mm-hmm. That happened to me when I was almost to a town in Spain called Ocebrero, which is ironic because it's Celtic, and that's why it starts with the O, as if it's an Irish place. It's Ocebrero. And when you arrive in Ocebrero, there are bagpipes playing. You're no longer in Spain, it feels, but Spain has a Celtic tradition prior to the Moors invading Spain. So anyway, I was walking up one of the steepest mountainsides I think I've ever walked up in my entire life. I was exhausted. I had developed plantar fasciitis in my heels, which is extremely painful. If I had been at home, I would have been in bed, but instead I continued walking for the whole rest of the journey. But I was almost to Ocebrero, halfway up this mountain, and I finally had just had enough, and I didn't know why I was doing it anymore. And I just wanted off of the side of the mountain. And I took one more step, and I took one more step, and before I knew it, I was in Ocebrero. And when I arrived in Ocebrero, I sat down in the church. and the bells started to ring. And I heard a voice that said, "The hard part is over. You've done well." And when I walked back out of the church, the clouds had lifted, the sky was blue, and everything was better. And I realized, this is almost making me emotional to talk about, because I realized that at those moments when you want to quit the most, if you just take one more step, that's when the miracles arrived.
In a way, I suppose that's what we're all doing on a daily basis in life,
Yes.
isn't it? We literally just put one foot forward and just keep going every single day.
And that's when the miracles arrive. And that's the thing about the Camino. The Camino is just a symbol for life. And we are all walking our Caminos.
How on earth did you actually sign up for this, though, Callie? Did you just wake up and think, I'm going to challenge myself today?
You know, I watched a movie. But, you know, I've watched lots of movies. I've watched Top Gun, and I never wanted to fly a fighter jet.
If Tom Cruise was there, I think I might be tempted.
Me too. Me too. But I watched a movie called The Way, and if you ever get a chance to watch it, first of all, you'll see what journey I'm talking about. But it came to me 3 times in 3, you know, I know we don't have a ton of time, but it came to me in 3 ways that were 3 sort of miraculous ways. And the third time that I saw the movie, all of a sudden, out of the blue, I said, I need to do this. And that was on April 27th.
What was the 3?
The first one was just seeing it in a movie theater. Just a random, I want to go to a movie, and I saw it in a theater. And I realized how beautiful Spain was and how much I would like to just go visit the country. I never thought I would wanted to walk across it. I just thought, I'll take a bus tour, you know?
Yeah. I'll fly over, go on a bus, maybe on a boat.
Right. And then the second time, I was on my way to a Wayne Dyer. You know who Wayne Dyer is? You know,
yes.
The change your thoughts, change your life type of deal. And I was going to a cruise of his that he was doing through the South Pacific out of Australia. And I was flying 14 hours across the Pacific Ocean and had fallen asleep. And something sort of shook me awake, and I woke up, and the movie was playing in the airplane. And I was like, oh, I remember this movie. I really like this. I'll watch it again. And again, I thought, you know, I need to make a plan to go to Spain. But again, I didn't think I need to walk. Well, the third time I had gotten home from this Wayne Dyer cruise, and I was looking for more of a spiritual community, people who did more meditation and positive thinking and that type of thing. And I had looked up a place that was near my home, and it was like not a church, but a spiritual center.
Yeah.
And I looked at their calendar to see what they were doing. And that Friday night, 3 days from that date, they were playing The Way in their auditorium. And
you just couldn't make it up, could you really?
No. And so I went to see it, and I knew then, and I'd had some other experiences in my life that were not great. Kind of my whole life had been sort of disassembled, ready to be put back together. And at that moment, I knew I needed to walk the Camino. And it was April 27th of 2012. And on May 1st, I started training. I gave myself a year, and I swore that I would leave. And usually I'm good at finding ways out.
Yeah.
But I trained for a year, got ready, because how do you walk 500 miles when you can't even walk a mile?
Yeah, I agree.
I trained for an entire year, had some miraculous experiences in my training. And then on May 1st of 2013, I got on the airplane.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know, you are one very, very brave lady. If I had a hat, I would take it off, just for the fact that, if nothing else, you know, you obviously, you was drawn to it.
The Camino
for you, that was
me.
meant to be.
Yeah, it called me. I didn't choose the Camino. The Camino chose me. And there was no getting out of it, because as I tried to quit, as I was doing my training, different miracles came along that didn't allow me to quit, that kept me going.
So you did actually have thoughts of, I'm so not doing this.
Oh, at least 100 times.
Just 100?
I'm not crazy. Yeah. I mean, I trained for a year, so that's like every 3 or 4 days.
I mean, how does your training even, how do you say to yourself, sitting here now, there's no way that I would sit here now and say to myself, right, Gemma, come on. Right. We're going to train you to walk 500 miles, because instantly my body says, don't think so, love. Right. Call a cab.
I got lucky enough to decide to take Spanish classes. Since I was going to spend, 2 months in Spain, I figured I better learn more than my high school Spanish had taught me.
Yeah.
And that was one of my Camino miracles. When I started my Spanish class, it was an intensive one-on-one class with an instructor who turned out to be, in addition to an amazing Spanish teacher, he was a long-distance backpacking guide. Right? So, yeah, the Camino just said, here you go.
I'm going to help you. You're not backing out, and I'll make sure, because your Spanish tutor is also going to be an experienced
exactly
backpacker. You are doing this. There is definitely no way out.
There was no way out. There really was. It was just like that day on the side of the mountain in Osobero. If I could just get out of here, I would quit. But I couldn't get out of it, because the universe just kept putting the right experiences in my path. So
that is absolutely phenomenal.
It really was. I've forgotten how phenomenal that journey was, and I'm glad that we got to talk about it today.
Well, it was a few years ago for you now, wasn't it? So, I suppose when things are that long ago, you do not necessarily tend to forget them, but they go to the back of your mind, because everyday life takes over.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
But there's no way that I could speak to you tonight without actually bringing that up. I mean, the first thing I thought was, is this woman crazy?
Well, yeah.
500 miles? Was there a plane, a boat, even a camel, How can this happen?
Yeah.
But then I suppose, looking at it from the other side of that coin, I suppose you have to push yourself. You have to put yourself out of your comfort zone to experience these spiritual, personal experiences.
Right. Well, and you finally realize that you can do anything if you break it up into small enough pieces.
I don't think there's pieces small enough for me to do 500 miles, Kelly. Although after speaking to you, a part of me thinks, I think we should do it.
Okay, you can go ahead and do it. I'm not doing it again.
Well, I was just going to say, shall we team up?
It was an amazing experience for me. I'm so glad I did it. But there are so many more amazing experiences that I want to have. That while I loved it, it's not something that calls me to do it again.
I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, not doing it again.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Oh, well, we are right out of time, I'm afraid, Kelly. I could talk to you for hours, but thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you. It was awesome talking to you.
And for everybody listening at home, there is shows on pretty much every night of the week, 9 o'clock, Parasearch Radio. If you do miss any shows, head on over to YouTube, where you can click, like, share and subscribe. So from myself, thank you so much for listening tonight, guys, and I will speak to you all tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.